The familiar forest in Colorado had become a regular escape for me, a haven located just a couple of hours away from my home. I found solace in the embrace of nature, often venturing into its depths every few months, particularly when the weather was inviting. On this particular occasion, I had set up camp and had already spent 2 full days immersing myself in the simplicity of the wilderness. The initial days were dedicated to establishing the campsite and engaging in peaceful fishing expeditions. As the 3rd day unfolded, I decided to embark on a hike north of my campsite. This wasn't a trek along well-worn trails. Instead, I navigated the mountainside, relying on my knowledge of landmarks and equipped with everything necessary to ensure I wouldn't lose my way. The midday sun warmed my path, and I relished the stroll. However, my tranquility was shattered when I noticed a column of smoke billowing from behind me, seemingly originating from near my campsite. Alarmed, I circled back, hoping for a clearer view. The unsettling sight persisted, hinting at something burning either at my camp or nearby. Anxiety fueled my hastened return, but upon reaching a quarter mile from the source of the smoke, it became evident that the disturbance was not directly linked to my camp. Puzzled, I confirmed that everything at my site was intact, but the mysterious smoke emanated from somewhere concealed within the trees. Contemplating whether to investigate, I hesitated. The probable cause was someone else's campfire, a perplexing occurrence considering the absence of trails leading to this specific spot. Wary of encountering unfamiliar individuals, I opted to remain at my campsite, dismissing the incident as an oddity, and continued with my day, engaging in various camp activities. Approximately an hour later, a casual survey of my surroundings gripped me with an unexpected sense of unease. My body tensed as I spotted a man standing silently in the forest. The suddenness of his presence and the way he gazed in my direction unsettled me. Unsure of how long he had been there, I nervously waved, but the man remained motionless. Although too far away to discern if he was watching me, he maintained his fixed gaze on the campsite for almost 15 minutes before vanishing into the woods. The eerie encounter left me unnerved. The man's behavior was inexplicable, and a lingering sense of discomfort enveloped me. Determined to ease my concerns, I waited for a few hours, vigilant of my surroundings. Eventually, curiosity overcame caution, and I ventured to the spot where the man had stood. To my bewilderment, there was nothing unusual, just another section of the forest. Returning to my campsite as the sun began to set, I attempted to dismiss the disquieting thoughts that plagued me. However, as darkness fell, an unanticipated flickering light caught my attention. Another campfire illuminated the forest, situated not in the direction of the earlier smoke but close to where the mysterious man had stood. Strangely, the fire seemed deserted, lacking any signs of human presence. A sense of foreboding gripped me as I scrutinized the dark expanse. My gaze darted across the surroundings, and behind a bush, mere feet away, I made eye contact with a face peering back at me. Panic surged through me, but the figure remained motionless, perhaps unaware that I had spotted them. I retreated behind my campfire, eyes fixed on the intruder. The ensuing 30 minutes felt like an eternity as the figure slowly receded into the shadows, disappearing into the depths of the forest. Wide-eyed and alert, I kept watch throughout the night, the rustling leaves and nocturnal sounds amplifying my paranoia. When the first light of dawn began to penetrate the forest, I wasted no time packing up my belongings. The woods that had once been a sanctuary now harbored an ominous presence, and an instinctive fear warned me against lingering. With swift determination, I walked briskly back to my car, leaving behind the enigma that had cast a shadow over my peaceful retreat. Whatever clandestine activities unfolded in those woods, I had no intention of becoming entangled in their potential harm. The story unfolds as a chapter from my life, a 26-year-old seeking solace and adventure. This tale takes place last year when I decided to embark on a solitary vacation, an escape to a serene cabin owned by a friend in a remote area. The alignment of circumstances saved me a considerable sum, a fact for which I felt profoundly grateful. Though I had never set foot in the cabin, I'd heard vivid descriptions from my friend, who painted it as the epitome of coziness and relaxation. Images shared with me hinted at a haven tucked away in nature, and the prospect of such tranquility fueled my anticipation for this much-needed retreat. The cabin stood as a beacon of serenity, a sanctuary yet to be explored, located approximately 40 minutes away from the nearest town. The remoteness felt substantial, amplified by the meandering journey along a dirt road that demanded a slow and deliberate pace. Upon my arrival, the allure of nature's embrace captivated me, prompting an hour spent simply standing outside, absorbing the scenic beauty and reveling in the quietude. A quick dinner and some time on my phone followed, setting the stage for an exploration of the surrounding trails as the daylight waned. Small trails, beckoning me with promises of discovery, sprawled near the cabin. To ensure their navigability, I sought assurance from my friend. Reassured, I embarked on the closest trail at the back of the cabin, a supposedly straightforward route leading through the woods. As I ventured down the uneven trail, the rhythm of my boots on the earth beneath became a tranquil symphony. The trail, though not the smoothest, did not pose any immediate threats of getting lost, assuaging my primary concern. I ambled for nearly half an hour, embracing the natural wonders around me and allowing my thoughts to drift into the calm of the wilderness. Then, an unexpected disruption echoed through the woods. A man's voice, loud and imbued with a harsh tone, pierced the ambient tranquility. The confusion triggered by this unexpected intrusion prompted me to halt, only for silence to descend upon the forest. Moments later, the voice resurfaced, emanating from somewhere to the right of the trail but obscured from my view. It seemed like the man was engaged in a heated exchange, possibly with someone else, though no responses were audible. This deviation from the norm raised a red flag, sparking a sense that something might be amiss. Uncertain of the presence of other cabins or houses in the vicinity, I deliberated my next move. The man's animated discourse, conducted in a language foreign to my ears, persisted, devoid of any discernible replies. Curiosity overcoming caution, I decided to approach quietly, careful not to lose sight of the trail. As I drew closer, the voices abruptly ceased, replaced by an uneasy stillness. A fleeting moment of unease prompted me to jog back to the safety of the trail. The disquieting aura lingered as I retraced my steps, hastening my return to the cabin as the sun began its descent. A mere couple of minutes down the trail, the crunching of leaves from the woods behind me jolted my senses. I whirled around, attempting to discern the source, but the shadows cast by the trees veiled any clear visibility. The sound, resembling someone running not too far away, heightened my apprehension. Without a second thought, I turned and sprinted the remaining distance to the cabin, securing myself within and fortifying the entrance. Peering out the back window, I immediately spotted a man approaching the cabin. Clad in a thick hoodie and brandishing an unidentified object, he embodied an ominous figure. In a desperate moment, I made a split-second decision to grab my keys and make a dash for my car, parked at the front of the cabin. I sped away, glancing behind to find no one in pursuit. Upon recounting the unnerving encounter with my friend, it became apparent that nobody should have been in that vicinity. The identity and motivations of the mysterious man in the woods remained shrouded in uncertainty. Yet, the unfolding events underscored the potential peril that lurked in the isolation of the wilderness. Had I chosen to remain within the cabin, the story might have taken a darker turn, consigning me to obscurity in the vast expanse of the unknown. My friend and I lived in a small town near Seattle. We loved camping and hiking, especially being out in nature. This story happened in the spring of 2021. We planned a regular camping trip nearby, but our work schedules made it a bit tricky to find the right days. My manager delayed my requested days off by a day, which messed up our plans. I talked to my friend Brandon, and he said it was okay. It was just a day off for me, and he was fine with hiking out and setting up camp alone, spending the first night by himself. He insisted he'd enjoy it, so I didn't try to stop him. Brandon messaged me when he arrived and set everything up. It all seemed good. The next morning, I drove out to join him. The campsite wasn't a common place, but it had a well-made trail and a cleared-out area for campers. It wasn't some random spot in the forest. I texted Brandon while on my way, but my phone lost service, and I didn't get a text back. My phone gained service a few times during the walk, but I still hadn't received a text. I thought maybe Brandon had service issues, or there was something wrong with my phone. There could be a million reasons, so I wasn't too surprised. Once I got to the camp, something was off. Brandon was missing. I checked the tent and nearby areas, but he wasn't there. I wasn't too worried initially. He could be fishing by the river or exploring some trails with nice views. He really could have been anywhere. I put my bag down, set up my tent, and got a fire going to heat some canned food. It was only noon, so if he'd gone to the river or down a trail, he probably wouldn't be back until 3 or 4 hours. But once 5 rolled around, I started to get nervous. I tried to see if I could find any shoe prints to figure out which way he might have gone. Honestly, I had no idea. There were tons of shoe prints all over the area, with no clear direction. My phone still had no service, so there weren't many options for me to go out and find him. My only logical choice was to stay put and hope he'd come back, hiking out when the sun only had another 30 minutes of light left. Going out in the dark would have been a disaster. I put more wood into the fire and sat down, hoping for the best but uncontrollably fearing the worst. That's when I saw a light flash by a few trees ahead of me. It moved around like someone was walking with it, near one of the trails. I felt relief thinking it had to be Brandon. The light came closer, getting brighter, and close enough for me to hear footsteps in the distance. But suddenly, right before I thought I'd see who it was, it shut off and the footsteps stopped. I called out to Brandon, but there was no response. The silence made my stomach tighten. I called again, but still nothing. It remained silent, deepening the disturbing gut feeling I had. To make things worse, I stared into the darkness, waiting and listening. After over an hour of complete silence, aside from the sounds of the woods, I never heard the person leave, but I could feel that he was still out there, watching me. I got up and started packing my things quickly, watching my back. Something in me told me to get out of there and find help, so that's what I did. I don't think I was followed, as I made it out without any more incidents, but the police couldn't help me until the following day. We went back out there, finding everything as I'd last seen it, but Brandon was still gone. They tracked him going off one of the trails and deeper into the woods, showing another set of shoe prints right next to his. Unfortunately, Brandon never turned up, and the whole thing went cold after a couple of days. It's believed he was likely taken by the person who was out there with him, the same person I'd encountered. It's just terrible thinking about whether things would have ended up differently if I had been there on the first day, or if I too would have gone missing. The uncertainty is haunting. I'm a 32-year-old female, but this story happened when I was 13 years old. One night, I was at my friend Kate's house. Her house was in a not-so-safe neighborhood, not far from our middle school. Kate's mom was a single parent, and she was working late, so it was just the two of us. But her mom had filled the house with lots of junk food, and she let us watch as many movies as we wanted on demand. Since it was still daytime, we decided to take a walk down to the pond in the park, which was only a couple of blocks away from her house. On our way back, when we were only 1 or 2 houses away, a car came up behind us. I didn't know who this person was, but my friend did. She said it was her neighbor, Andy, who lived right next door. Andy, as far as I can remember, looked much older, maybe in his early 50s. He had a sort of grayish beard and always wore a baseball cap. I don't know why. He drove his car slowly toward us and asked what we were planning to do that evening. Kate told him we were having a sleepover with a friend, and we might prank call some kids from our school and stay up late watching scary movies. Andy just laughed and smiled at both of us. But even though I was just a 13-year-old girl, I didn't feel good about the way he smiled at us. I didn't know this stranger, and I was surprised that my friend shared so much with him. But maybe she knew him better. Andy spoke in a quiet voice and said, "Hey, Kate, I noticed your mom's car isn't in the driveway, so I guess she's working late again, right?" Kate, being her usual friendly self and not realizing anything was off, replied, "Yep, she's doing the late shift, so it's just us in the house tonight." Andy gave that same weird smile and said, "All right, you girls have fun with your sleepover and try not to get into too much trouble tonight." Then he slowly drove past us and parked his car in his own driveway. When we walked up the driveway to Kate's house, we noticed that Andy was still looking at us as he went into his own home. Once we got inside, I asked Kate about her neighbor because he made me feel uneasy. Kate agreed that he was a bit creepy, but she didn't think he was a danger. Kate was the type who trusted people easily and was carefree, while I was more cautious and kind of a goody-goody. So, we made a pizza, gathered snacks, watched some movies, and chatted with our friends on AM later. It was close to midnight, maybe even 1 a.m., but Kate's mom still wasn't back home. We were starting to drift off to sleep in our sleeping bags in the living room. The TV was on, playing a scary movie in the background. All of a sudden, Kate muted the TV and spoke quietly. She said, "I think I saw the motion detection light in her backyard go on and off." She then carefully got up to check out the window that looked over their backyard. I walked over quietly and asked if she saw anything. She didn't see anything at first, but after a while, we saw the light come on again. We did our best to see outside, but it was tough. Kate decided to go down to their basement to see if she could get a better look through one of the windows down there. We walked down to the basement stairs, being careful not to trip in the darkness. We didn't want to turn on the lights, just in case someone or something outside could see us. It was strange to see Kate taking things so seriously because she was usually the more relaxed friend. Maybe all those scary movies were making us both extra jumpy. In the basement, there was a big window next to a door on the far side. The motion detection light turned on again, and some light came through the window, letting us see a bit in the small basement. Suddenly, we heard the door that led to the backyard in the basement start to shake. We both got a big fright and let out screams. The window on the door had blinds covering it, so we couldn't see who was trying to open the door. But we knew someone was trying to get inside. Thankfully, the door was locked with a deadbolt, but still, we were very scared. Kate spotted a baseball bat on the sofa and slowly moved closer to the door. I whispered to her that we should leave and maybe call her mom or the police. But Kate carefully lifted a corner of the blinds on the door's window. The person on the other side was still trying to open the door. Kate pulled up the blinds, and guess who we saw? It was her neighbor, Andy. We both screamed when we saw him. Andy raised his hands and said, "Whoa, it's okay, girls. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to make sure you're safe. It's really late, and I thought I saw someone in your yard." Kate and I exchanged worried glances, then looked at Andy. There was something creepy and scary in his eyes, so we both felt he was lying. We knew he was the one trying to break into Kate's house. Kate told him to leave, or she called the police. Andy just stared at us and said he wanted to make sure we were safe since he knew we were home alone. He reached for the doorknob again and wanted us to unlock the deadbolt. I grabbed Kate's arm and told her to dial 911 right away. I yelled that we were calling the police immediately, and he better leave. Andy glared at us, then stepped back from the door. He quickly looked to the right, then turned and ran to his backyard. Kate and I rushed upstairs, and that's when her mom came into the house. She asked us why we were in the basement, and we both quickly told her what had happened with Andy. Kate's mom was surprised, but didn't think calling the police would help because Andy hadn't actually broken in or harmed us. Kate and I were both really scared and wanted her mom to call the police to report him, but she kept saying that the police probably couldn't do much. Luckily, I didn't run into Andy again during the few more times I visited Kate's house. Not too long after, Kate and her mom moved away. I don't know what Andy wanted or what he was planning that night, but I'm very thankful we didn't have to find out. This story happened when I was in elementary school. My mom, my brother, and I had moved to Canada a few years before this happened. We rented an apartment where most of our neighbors were also newcomers to the country. One day, as we were waiting for the elevator, a lady and her daughter, who had a disability, came and stood with us. They were talking in a language similar to ours, but it was a version spoken in Afghanistan, not Iran, where we originally came from. This got my mom's attention, and she was really happy to find out that this lady spoke the same language. They started talking, and it was clear that her daughter couldn't speak or use sign language because of her severe disabilities. My mom and I often met each other in our building and the neighborhood. There was a man whom she thought was bothering and following her daughter. He was a single dad, and his daughter was only a bit older than me. I looked after their dog a few times, so I knew them both well. His daughter told us that her parents had separated, and her dad got custody of her. One evening, my mom and I had just come home and were getting out of the elevator when we ran into the lady. She came up to us and said it was her daughter's birthday. She really wanted us to join them for some cake. I always felt strange around her, and I wasn't excited to join them, but my mom felt sorry for her, and she promised we wouldn't stay too long. So, we followed her into her apartment, but something just didn't feel right. Her daughter was sitting in the dark with only a small nightlight. In the middle of the living room, they had set up a kind of picnic with plates, forks, and homemade cake. But when we sat down and were just starting to feel comfortable, suddenly my mom's phone rang, and that surprised us. As my mom answered the phone, the lady hurried into the living room and asked my mom to put her phone on silent. Then she told us to be super quiet so that the guy wouldn't know we were here. I got a really weird feeling. Who was this guy she was talking about? My mom said sorry and asked her to explain. That's when she started telling us that the man who lived in the apartment below them was making their life miserable. She said he would bang the ceiling with a broom at all hours of the night to let them know he knew they were home. And she said one time, he convinced her daughter to go out on the balcony and tried to get her to jump. She said he would knock on their door in the middle of the night and say disturbing things through the door. My mom asked her why she hadn't told anyone about it, and the lady said she was afraid he would find out and harm them. She told us that's why they kept their place in the dark, didn't have a TV, and tried to make no noise, only whispering when they were home. We finished the cake, thanked her for inviting us, and got ready to leave. Then, she quietly went to her door, signaled us to hide from the view of the door, which we did. She slowly opened it, looked outside left and right, then turned to us and said it was safe to go. When we got back home, I told my mom that I didn't believe what she was saying, because I knew the people who lived in that unit. My mom told me not to get involved and forget about it. Weeks passed, and we didn't see the lady and her daughter. But one morning, when I was leaving her building for school, I saw letters stuck to the walls in the lobby. They were all over the place, but I was just a kid and thought they were letters from the people who managed the building. But when I opened the lobby door, I noticed a letter taped to the building's intercom. The letter was written by the lady, and she explained how scared she was for herself and her daughter. She said that, despite many tries, no one had helped her with the situation. She talked about the same things she had told us before. The very last paragraph sent chills down my spine. She claimed that she was sexual assault and impregnated by a demon in her sleep. She then said if something happens to either of them, we should find ourselves responsible. I ended up asking the girl and her dad what that was all about, and her dad claimed to have only ever seen her twice. The 2 times he had seen her, he hadn't even looked at her because she was talking to herself, and he was very scared. He mentioned that she would slip notes under his door, and later he discovered they had Arabic writing on them. He showed one of his Arabic friends the notes, and his friend said they contained verses from the Quran that Muslims use to protect themselves from evil. He didn't know it was her until the letters started showing up all over the building on every floor. So they were told to leave their apartment, and she had threatened to harm herself and her daughter. The building management had to call the police because she was a danger to herself and others. After some time, we all kind of forgot about it and moved on with our lives. We moved to a different part of town not long after, but I always remembered that event. In 2020, I went back to the old place to meet a childhood friend who still lived there. I bumped into the building manager and we started talking. I asked him about the incident and if he ever found out what had really happened. It turns out the lady had a condition called schizophrenia, which made her see and hear things that weren't real. She was forced into marriage when she was very young, and her daughter's disabilities were because of the severe abuse she suffered while pregnant. She was very mentally ill and truly believed in the things she said. Her daughter was actually able to speak, but her mom did everything to keep her away from the outside world. Her mom and I initially thought the daughter was between 14 to 16 years old, but she was actually 30. She was very undernourished, didn't take care of herself, and it was clear she wasn't being properly looked after. Her daughter had never been to a hospital or school, which was really sad. When I was growing up, I lived with my mom in a small house. During my middle school and high school years, she took up an overnight job, so most nights of the week I was alone between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. This happened a few months before I graduated high school. On a regular night at 7:30, I said goodbye to my mom like usual, then I played some video games for a few hours. It was a school night, so I couldn't stay up super late, but I still stayed up later than I should have. Around 11:30, I shut everything off and went up to my room to get in bed, but I was on my phone for probably another hour before falling asleep. When I woke up, I thought I heard a door closing downstairs. I looked over at the clock next to my bed and saw it was 3:30, so I assumed my mom had just gotten home from work early. I turned over and tried to go back to sleep as I listened to footsteps walking around downstairs. After a minute, though, I started listening more intently. Usually, my mom would go straight upstairs when she got home to get ready for bed, but it sounded like they were just walking around. As I listened for another 2 or 3 minutes, I realized they weren't even stopping at all. They were going through each room, walking slowly as if they were taking a tour of the house. I started to get a little nervous that it might not be my mom and could be someone else. I got up and turned on the light in my room, and almost right away, the footsteps stopped. I listened from the other side of my door and still heard nothing. Carefully, I opened it and looked out into the hallway. I was expecting to see some lights coming from downstairs, but the whole house was dark. Whoever was walking around down there hadn't turned on any of the lights, which frightened me more than I already was. I made sure not to make any sounds and stepped further down the hallway until I was at the top of the stairs. Then I knelt down and looked through the railing to see into the living room. Nobody was there, and even in the dark, I could tell that nothing had been moved at all. My PlayStation was still there, and in my head, that was a telltale sign that there was nobody else in the house except for maybe my mom. I mean, if someone was here to rob us and had walked through the whole house, they definitely would have taken the most expensive thing in the room. At that point, I just wanted to know if it was my mom who was walking around, or if I was having some weird auditory hallucinations. I walked down the steps to the bottom and called out, "Well, you all?" There was no response or signs of movement in the whole house, so I walked through the hallway into the kitchen. Right away, I saw a shoe print on the tile floors, and when I looked up, my eyes locked on a figure. Across the room, a man was sitting at the dining table with a dark mask on. His clothing was all black, which made it difficult to fully make out any features of him. He was looking at me, but he didn't say anything or even move. He stared at me with an emotionless look. I ran straight back upstairs and locked myself in my room as I called 911. The operator kept me updated on the police's estimated arrival, But after a minute, I heard the man slowly walk across the downstairs and over to the bottom of the staircase. I was whispering to the operator in a panic until I heard the front door open and the man walking away from the house. Not even 30 seconds later, I saw headlights shining through the window. My mom pulled into the driveway and I ran outside to meet her and tell her what was going on. When police got there, they did a thorough search and found nothing incriminating that would help us find the man. But from what it seems, the man wasn't there to rob us. He also didn't seem to have any interest in me either, which means that he was most likely trying to hurt or abduct my mom. It would then make sense why he broke in only minutes before my mom usually gets home. It makes me think about what could have happened if I hadn't gone downstairs to see who was there, or if my mom had gotten home just a minute earlier and gone inside, unknowing of the man that was waiting for her. I was 18 at the time, and it was the beginning of summer, so I was off from school and I didn't have any job. The majority of my time was spent inside the house playing video games, watching YouTube or TV, or just relaxing. When this happened, my parents were out of town for a few days, leaving me with the house. This was a common thing and was never a big deal. Sometimes I'd invite friends over or whatever, but this night I was just enjoying the time to myself. I was watching a rerun of one of my favorite shows on Netflix while also scrolling through my phone. It was late, I don't know the exact time, but I think maybe 11 or 12, when there was a knock at the front door. So I paused the TV and went to see who it was. It almost didn't even register in my mind that it was so late, but thankfully it did before I carelessly would have opened the door. I looked in the peephole and saw two men, both wearing similar clothes and just waiting for me to answer. I stood there and thought for a second whether or not to let them know I was home by asking what they wanted. I ended up staying quiet and just watching to wait for them to leave, but a few seconds later, they called out, "Hello? We're here looking to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Iaz." That was my parents they were referring to, though I changed the name for privacy. Confused, I still remained quiet, knowing it was far too late for any sort of visit, even if it was important. After a minute, the men looked at each other and said something quietly, then walked off the porch. The outdoor lights were off, so I couldn't see where they went, but I never saw any headlights or cars show up, which had me wondering if they'd walked here, which would only make things weirder. I went back to the TV, but left it on pause for a while so I could hear if they came back. It only took a few minutes until I heard a pair of footsteps outside the house. They went up to the porch, but instead of knocking like they did before, they started making their way around to the side of the house. I got up and ran to the back window. As they got to the backyard, I saw them open the fence and enter, and I hid away from the window so I wouldn't be seen, but I could hear them go up to the back door. They started talking, then began messing with the door. I took this as my chance to get my phone and hide inside the garage. I called the police, explaining the possible break-in that was taking place, and after less than a minute, a loud pop sound vibrated through the house, and the back door slid open. Their footsteps went through the house and straight to the stairs, going up to the bedrooms. A door opened, they entered, then closed it behind them. But after that, there were no more sounds. I waited for a horrifying and slow 10 minutes in silence before the police pulled up to the house. When they did, there was a few quick footsteps upstairs. Then the two men started arguing. A few officers came in through the back door and ran upstairs, while another came to the garage and helped me outside. The men didn't resist the rest, but they also didn't speak a word on why they were there. Despite weeks going by, and it being somewhat obvious that they weren't simply robbing the house, the only thing they could charge them with was breaking and entering. It scares me, though, that they seem to be looking for my parents, and it almost felt like they were going to wait upstairs for them until they came back from their trip. I think back to whether or not I should have shown myself and if that would have stopped the break-in, but something about their behavior tells me that they still would have broken in and would have done to me whatever was necessary. I'm 32 and live alone in a rural house. I have a few neighbors half a mile down that I talk to sometimes, but I mostly keep to myself and only go into town when I need to. I'm half retired, so I spend most of my time at home, but a few months out of the year I do some contracting work. At the time it was late fall, and on this day I was getting all of my equipment from out in the yard and storing it in the shed to prepare for the winter season. It was just a bunch of tools and lawnmowers and stuff like that I'd left out. Anyway, while I was outside, I saw something unusual. A man was walking along the road that connected to my driveway. He had nothing on him, no backpack or camping gear. For context, this road he was on was entirely empty aside from the few houses like mine, and the town was a 4-hour walk away. I watched him until he disappeared far off down the road. After he was gone, I looked down in both directions and saw no cars on the side of the road on either direction. It was really odd, but after a while I stopped thinking about it and finished up with my yard. I was back inside before dark and made dinner while I cooled off. As I sat there, a sudden thud from outside startled me up from the table. It was a wooden thump, like it had come from where the shed was. I looked through the window out into the yard, and the door to the shed was wide open. It was old, but the door had never unlatched on its own like that before. Still unsure of exactly what was going on, I knew I had to check on it and close the door at the very least. I got my rifle just in case, but I was confident it wasn't going to be anything dangerous. Walking out to the shed, I listened carefully and heard nothing other than the quietness of the night. I looked around the field as well and saw no signs of wildlife or people. When I got to the open shed door, I turned on my flashlight and shined it inside. Nothing looked out of place. I stepped in and did a more thorough search for any animals hiding, but still there wasn't anything. I closed the door to the shed and made sure it was secure, then started walking back. As I made my way through the field toward my house, an eerie feeling grew inside me. I didn't know what it was, but it continued to grow as I reached the front door. I stepped in and locked the door behind me. As I walked into the hallway, I saw a shoe print right on the floor. I flicked on the light, and going across the hallway was a line of dirty shoe prints leading up to the spare bedroom. My heart started beating faster as I held my rifle up and took a deep breath, then carefully walked up to the door. I leaned my head against the wood and listened, hearing what sounded like someone breathing right on the other side. Before I could even think on what to do next, the handle twisted from my grip and the door swung open. I jumped back and held the rifle up as a man looked like he was about to charge at me, holding a huge metal shovel up. I think my gun stopped him in his tracks, though. He stood in the doorway, holding the shovel like a weapon and having a face full of rage. I yelled as loud as I could for him to stay back, trying to sound intimidating, but I was undoubtedly terrified. The man kept his distance, but his face full of anger never faded. From this moment, though, I didn't know what to do. Cops wouldn't be able to make it here for probably an hour if I called, and I definitely didn't want to hold him at gunpoint for that long, risking anything to happen. As we stood in a strange silence, the man suddenly threw the shovel in my direction, then sprinted back into the room. I ran in to see what he was doing and watched him start crawling out of the window. Part of me wanted to stop him, but another part of me couldn't get myself to. He jumped out and ran off into the field, escaping in the vast empty night with no way of knowing where he was running off to. To this day, that man has never been identified, and his intentions are unknown. All I can say is that if I hadn't had my rifle in my hands, or if he had gotten the jump on me, I likely wouldn't be here today. I don't go on many trips out of town, so this was one of the few times I've had to stay somewhere other than a friend or family's house. The area I needed to stay in was small, and most of the hotels didn't look very nice. But to my surprise, there was a single home listed on Airbnb. It was my first time using the site, but the house looked like a decent place, much better than the hotels. I requested the dates, and in a few minutes, the place was booked. The following week, I started the drive. When I got to the town, which was about 14 hours from my city, it was well into the night. The town almost looked deserted compared to where I was used to living. All the houses' lights were off, and all the stores were closed. No people or cars were out. Of course, it was the middle of the night, so I didn't expect this small town to be lit up and active at this time, but it was still eerie, considering I hadn't seen it during the day. I only came in with this as the first impression. The street that took me to the Airbnb was dark as well, leading through a winding forested neighborhood until I eventually ended up at the house. It was one of few that had its porch and outdoor lights on, but one window upstairs had a light coming through it as well. I figured the last customer had just made the mistake of leaving it on, so I thought nothing of it and started getting my stuff up to the front door. I got the key code from my email and opened the door, getting inside and locking the door behind me. I quickly put my stuff in the corner of the room, then went upstairs to turn off the light that was left on. It was one of the spare bedrooms, only having a bed and a small dresser in it. I flipped it off, then went to the main bedroom to set up my things. I was only staying for the one night, but I had it booked for 2 because I needed to be there late into the following day. I was up for no more than an hour before finally getting in bed and turning in for the night. I rested my eyes and tried to sleep, but was laying awake for a long time. I sat up quickly, hearing the thud run through the walls of the house. I stared at the door, trying to think what could have been the cause of the sound, but with no ideas coming to mind, I got up to check. I opened the door softly, peering into the upstairs hallway. It was dark and quiet now. No more thuds, only the sound of the house swaying in the wind. I stepped back and quietly shut the door, but a strange feeling came to me that had me wait as I thought more about the sound I heard. As I stood there, soft creaks started to go along the floorboards from the other room. I listened with my ear against the door as the creaking moved into the hallway and then began making its way toward the door. I was so in shock that I almost didn't realize that it had to be footsteps of someone approaching. My heart started racing as they came right up to the other side of the door. I put my hand tightly on the door handle to keep it from moving, and only a moment later, I felt it pull down. As soon as I resisted it, they eased off. There was a small moment before suddenly the handle was forced down and they slammed into the door. It swung half open before I pressed my body back into it. I only saw half of their face in the doorway, but in their eyes was an anger that I didn't expect to ever see. After a struggle, I somehow managed to push the door back into the latch and lock it. The man on the other side tried to get it back open, but after yelling a few unpleasant words towards me, he ran downstairs and out of the house. I was still catching my breath and my mind was racing, but I gathered myself up and dialed 911. For such a small town, they came shortly after. The owner of the Airbnb continued with the case after I left on the following day, but I wish I'd kept up with it. That man seemed so desperate to get into my room and was in some state of rage, like he wanted to hurt me as if I'd done something to him. Everything about it is disturbing, and I don't think I'll ever get it out of my head, but Airbnbs probably won't be something I take part in again for a long time. When I was in university, I would take 6 courses every semester because I was doing a dual degree, and I wanted to get it all done in 4 years. This meant a lot of semesters I was up to my neck and ears in homework and studying all the time. My university had a library that was open until midnight. I was also interning this semester, so I really had almost no time to do my work. I still lived on campus at this point, and my suite mates could be very loud and distracting sometimes. This was a Wednesday night, so I had 3 classes that day and my internship. I also had 2 exams the following day, so right after I finished up at my internship, I went straight to the library. Our campus library was very big. When I got there at 9 p.m., there were still a decent amount of people everywhere, but from 9 to 10 it quiets down a lot, and I was planning on being there until 12 studying for my 2 exams the next day. Around 11, most people were gone, but there were still some around. I was sitting at one of the tables sandwiched between 2 bookshelves on either side, so it was a little more private and secluded where I was sitting. Less distractions. By 11 o'clock, some guy who looked to be in his upper 20s came into the section and passed one of the multiple empty tables and came to mine, where he sat down diagonally across from me at the table. I looked up, and he looked back at me and smiled as he was setting his books down. I looked back down and just tried to focus on my studying and not wonder too much why he decided to sit at my table. I was going through the slides to study on my laptop when the guy at my table said "excuse me," then asked me if I by chance was taking a specific economics course. I politely told him no, sorry, hoping that would be the end of it. But then he started explaining why he asked that, because his quote-unquote professor is a bitch and gives pop quizzes every day. I said, well, that really sucks. Then I tried to go back to studying. Mentally, my mind wasn't completely into the material anymore now. Now I was distracted by the presence of this man, who I had a feeling was going to keep trying to talk to me. I looked up from my laptop screen and saw that man looking at me, smiling with his lips. I looked back down at my laptop, contemplating getting up and moving elsewhere or just leaving. He then asked my name. I made up a name and said Chelsea. He said, "You have such blue eyes, Chelsea." This was when I started to wonder if this man was really here to study or creep on women, and the fact that he looked like he was almost 30 didn't help. I asked him what the name of his economics professor was. He took the second, then said Professor Davis. I asked if he knew the first name. He shook his head no. I went straight to ratemyprofessor.com and looked up any professors with the last name Davis at our school. And only one came up, a calculus professor whose last reviews were left years ago. I decided to get up and go ask the security worker at the front door for help. As I got up, I felt the stare of that man at the table watching me walk over to the security worker and tell him that this man was creeping me out and I don't think he's a student. The security worker walked back over with me and asked to see the man's student ID. He started looking through his wallet, then his pockets, and then he said he must have left it at his dorm. The security worker then asked what dorm building he's in. The guy was clearly lying because he didn't know what to say and eventually just said, "I honestly don't remember what it's called." The security worker walked him out of the library and he came back and told me to just be careful while walking back to my dorm. I thanked him. The whole rest of the time at the library, my mind was so distracted just thinking about what a creep that guy was. I did my best to keep studying, and around 12, I knew it was time to wrap it up so I could get some sleep. I packed up and left through the same way the security guard escorted that man out. He wasn't standing there at that moment. I don't know where he went. I started walking through the basically deserted campus. No one walks around that late on a Monday to Wednesday night. That's why eventually when I was nearing my dorm building and I heard at least one loud sound of a shoe hitting the concrete behind me, I turned around, but I saw no one there. I knew for a fact I heard a footstep though. I started to run now, which may have been a mistake, because the second I started to run, which was made more difficult because of my backpack, I heard running footsteps behind me. I turned and saw that man from the library sprinting towards me. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but only for a second before I was tackled to the ground and had a hand over my mouth. He kept threatening me, saying, "You better shut up or I'll kill you." I genuinely thought my life was about to end. I was trying to call out for help still, but it was muffled by his hand. He then got to his feet and started to drag me by the throat out of sight of the main walkways, and I saw he was dragging me in the direction of the woods right by the dorms. I managed to remove his hand from my mouth for just long enough to scream again. It was enough to get the attention of these two guys who came running over yelling, "Hey, stop," at my kidnapper. The man let go of me and started running off towards the woods. The two guys came over to me, and I'm sure they were asking me if I was okay and whatnot, and I blocked all noise out for a few moments. I was in total shock. I completely let my emotions out and started bawling my eyes out. The two guys called university police, and I did my best to keep myself together and explain. We went to the library to ask the security worker for his description of the man as well. It matched my description of the man. The police were also able to use the footage from the library counters to get a clear picture of the man's face. The picture was sent out to all students' phones and emails and the school website, and that same night, there was an anonymous tip that the man was at a late-night dive bar down the road from school. The police arrived at the bar and arrested him. The level of trauma this induced on me was incredible. I can't even imagine the trauma for those who weren't as lucky as me in situations like this. We moved to a new town when I was 7. Any memories before that move I consider to be very early childhood, and a lot of those memories are blurry at this point. This is one of those memories. This happened at some age before 7, I know that. If I had to guess, I was 5, maybe 6. There was the local town library that our mom would always take my brothers and I to. It was a few blocks away, actually. I remember this one day, it was my mom and my little brother, who was a toddler at this point. We started the day at the mall, probably spent hours there tagging along with our mom shopping. Whenever we'd go to this mall, she'd always bring us to the McDonald's inside the mall to get us ice cream cones. I remember we got ice cream on this particular day, because on the way to the library after leaving the mall, I still had some of the cone left in my hand. We arrived to the library, and there was this kids' computer section that my mom would let me stay at and play computer games while she went and did whatever she'd do. When I got bored of playing whatever old online computer games there were at the time, I got up and started walking through the aisles of books in the kids section of the library, looking for the I Spy books. The kids section was in the far corner of the library, and while I was walking from aisle to aisle, I heard a psst from behind me. I turned around and saw nothing. I was looking at the back wall of the library, which had another shelf of books leaning on it. Then I saw half of a grown man's face peer around the shelf and said, "Peekaboo." I remember laughing and feeling no sense of danger. He did it again. He went back behind the shelf, then peered out his head again and said, "Peekaboo." Again, I laughed. He asked me what I was looking for, and I said the I Spy books. He said he'll help me find it. He came over and took my hand and started leading me through the aisles, leading us, I guess, to the section of books that began with the letter I. And there they were, at least 5 I Spy books next to each other. I grabbed my favorite one, the treasure hunt one, and he said, "Let's go sit down and play." He led me to a table in the corner by a couple children's computers, and we started looking through the pictures. This went on for some time, and he was asking me questions about myself as we played I Spy. The question that still sticks out to me the most is, "Who are you here with?" And I told him my mom and little brother. At some point after this, he said something implying that there's a kid's playroom downstairs, and I, at that age, never knew that there was a downstairs to the library. He said we could take the book down there. He led me to the door that led to the basement of the library, which, for reference, is actually where events and meetings for certain clubs and organizations are held. And there is actually a little playroom down there, I guess for parents who have to bring their kids with them during any of the meetings. The man led me to that little playroom. There were various toys in there, most notably a Lego set and a Lego table, and then there were a bunch of chairs. He set the I Spy book down on the Lego table. This is where things get really uncomfortable thinking back on. As he was trying to forcibly get me to play with the toys, I started to get uncomfortable. And around this time, over the loudspeaker, a female librarian said into the intercom, "Will Liam come to the front, please? Your mother's looking for you." At this time, the man went to turn off the lights in the room, and now it was pitch black inside. He said in the dark, "We're gonna play hide and seek." This was the first moment I was genuinely freaked out, and I started to yell for my mom. I remember he kept telling me to be quiet, and his voice was getting louder as he was getting closer to me in the dark, until he had his hands on me. I thankfully managed to run past him and out the door of that room, and I ran down the dark hallway back to the stairs. And as I was running up the stairs, I had that same childhood feeling of running up the basement stairs after turning off the lights, only 100 times worse, because I genuinely was scared I was going to be grabbed. I made it back to the main floor of the library and ran straight to the front desk, calling for my mom. She was at the front desk with a group of librarians, and I remember the relief on my mom's face when she saw me. I told her there was some man who took me downstairs, and she literally lost it. The next thing I remember from there was a bunch of police in the building searching around, but I never saw that man again. He must have exited the building through a different way. I remember speaking to some woman who was probably with the police, asking me very delicate questions. I never really asked my mom about this experience that many times, because it's very uncomfortable, and I'd rather just not think of it. I used to work at the local public library when I was in my early 20s. I'd worked the night shifts as my second job at least 3 times a week after my first job. I'd get there at 6 and would work till closing time at 9. I would also be the one to lock up the place after closing, but I wouldn't just leave right after the library would close. I'd have to shut off all the computers, do some cleaning and organizing, stock the shelves with all the returned books and DVDs from the day, take out the garbage, and only then could I leave. It was a Friday night approaching closing time. Most of the other library staff was gone already. It was just myself and one of the female librarians left. I had made a couple last call announcements to the remaining library patrons, alerting them that the library would be closing soon. I was already cleaning up the place, trying to finish up early so I could leave and just start my weekend. The only other employee still there said goodbye to me as soon as the clock struck 9 o'clock. I announced on the intercom that the library was closed. The 2 guests that were left got up from their tables and started packing up their things before leaving through the door. After that, when I saw no one else in the building, I locked the front door. I proceeded to start fixing all the chairs to be neatly tucked under their tables. Then I started emptying all the garbage cans, and when it was time to bring them outside to the dumpster on the side, I unlocked the front door again and brought them out. It was quiet outside. The library was kind of tucked away from any main roads. When I came back inside, I locked the door again. Now all I had to do was restock all the returned books and DVDs from the day. I grabbed the 2 boxes and started with the DVDs, which was easier since the DVD section was smaller. It took about 5 to 10 minutes. During this time, I thought for sure I heard something come from one of the book aisles. I started walking through the aisles till I found an open book laying on the floor, which had clearly just fallen off the shelf. I put it back in its place, and for a second I stood there and just wondered, how could that have happened? I went back to work, and after finishing the DVDs, I took the box of books and started putting them one by one back on the shelves. Going in alphabetical order, I started with the A's. The books in the box were sorted in alphabetical order to make it easy. As I worked my way down the shelves, trying to bang this out and go home, I heard another noise nearby. 2 times in less than 20 minutes. That was no coincidence. I set the box down and started walking through the aisles of books again. I found another 2 books on the ground in another aisle. Someone was in here. I walked out to the open area with all the tables and such and yelled out, "Excuse me, the library is closed." There was silence, till I heard something from across the library, from the children's section. I approached the noises, and it started to sound like some rabid animal making growling sounds. I also heard books being thrown onto the floor. It was coming from one aisle. As I built up the courage to peek down the aisle, I saw some woman wearing a nightgown throwing random books off the shelf. making these disgusting animal-like sounds. I didn't say anything. I turned and ran to the office where we had the phone. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I locked the office door and closed the blinds to the window. Then I called 911. I reported that there was some sickly woman in the library and I think they should send an ambulance. They asked if I had approached the woman, and I said no, she looked like she could be dangerous. When the operator asked me if the woman was still in the same spot, I opened the blinds and I screamed because that woman was right on the other side of the glass looking in. Her pupils were so big that she looked demonic. I said to the operator, she's right outside the office. The woman started to bang on the glass screaming gibberish. She tried opening the door, and when it didn't open, she turned around and sat on a chair facing the office. The operator asked me to keep the blind open and watch her. The woman was wobbly as she sat down, so I noted she was definitely high out of her mind. 2 police cars and an ambulance showed up to the library. The woman was put in handcuffs because she tried fighting the police officers, but nothing she was saying made any sense. She was put in the back of an ambulance and was taken away. I never found out what the hell she was on. I don't know how she got inside. Maybe while I was taking the garbage out, or maybe she was inside before I then locked the place up. Either way, it definitely made being in the library alone after closing pretty unsettling from there on out.